This is part 12 of the Craftsman Emerson Gen 2 Drill Press Rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 11, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we will be assembling the sub-assemblies. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. The first thing we're going to be working on is the spindle pulley assembly, and this has two ball bearings. They're 6205 ball bearings, and once I get one out of here, these are both notchy bearings and they are shielded. That means they've got the metal sides on them. These are made in Japan bearings, very high quality. So we're going to attempt to slide this bearing on. Sometimes they slide on, sometimes you got to help them. This one's going to need some help. So I've just got a piece of PVC pipe that's going to rest on the inner race of that ball bearing. And then I'll tap it back all the way down and in place. And once I got the bearing down there, I realized that there's some play when that ball bearing, the inner race is actually spinning and it's sliding on that shaft. So there's a little bit of a gap there. And that's why we don't ever want to dry sand that part, which we didn't. But the fix for that is Loctite 680, which is a bearing setting compound. This stuff comes out kind of like a syrup. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some on the shaft and then slide the bearing down over it and let it sit. We'll get it on that shaft in a couple spots. And it'll help bond that bearing in a non-permanent way to the shaft or the inner race of the bearing. So then we'll install the spacer and then the second bearing and then the outer retaining ring, inner retaining ring. It's one of those two. It's a retaining ring. And that completes the spindle pulley assembly. Next, we're going to be assembling the quill and spindle assembly. And we have two ball bearings for this. They are 6202 special bore 5/8. And these are also shielded. These are NTN bearings. So we'll slide the first bearing down on there, and then we've got a retaining ring that we install. And then we got the quill, and then the second bearing, and another retaining ring. And that is the quill spindle assembly. Next, we're going to assemble the Jacob's chuck, and for lubricating it, I'm using an NLGI number 2 grease. This is Mystic. It's got moly in it, and it's a great grease for this. So I'm pointing out that there are markings on the chuck body that tell you 1, 2, and 3. And that's so you can figure out where each jaw goes. So I've got a video on the chuck, how to disassemble it, how to assemble it, how to install it, multiple ways, just about everything you want to know about the Jacob's chuck. And in that video, I explain how to tell the difference between each one of those jaws. So I will put a link for that video here. I also have a part 2 for that series, or video, I guess, talking about the Supreme chuck, and because some of the Emerson drill presses came with Supreme chucks on them. So I will show you how to disassemble, assemble, clean, all that stuff, a Supreme chuck in that new video that will be coming out shortly. In any case, after we've lubed up the body a little bit, we just insert those jaws in the correct order and in the correct spot that they go. And then we'll add some lube to the threads for each one of the jaws and that recessed area there that the split nut sits in. And once we've got it all lubed up, we just need to have the back end of each one of those jaws pretty much level. They all need to be kind of in alignment. And then we can drop the split nuts, each half of them, in that channel, and then kind of work it, kind of play with it until it engages all of the teeth on all three of the jaws. And I'll end up taking my gloves off here because those sharp edges on the chuck body that I always talk about, they tear up the gloves, so it's just easier to take them off and get them out of the way. But if you play with it enough, eventually all that will start to move like it's supposed to. And we keep playing with it. And I'm actually going to open it back up and then start to close it. There we go. So we want to go ahead and spin the jaws all the way out and make sure that they're flush. And if they are, we're good. If they're not flush, then one of the jaws is protruding further than the others, or you've got them in the wrong order. Then we're going to lube up the inside of the sleeve. And I really wish they marked the jaws with 1, 2, and 3. It would have made life so much simpler, but they don't. And then we'll just slide the sleeve over the chuck. So to compress the sleeve, we need to have the jaws retracted about halfway. They need to be protruding from the chuck about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, somewhere in there. Then we just slide the sleeve on there, and then we'll head over to the vise. So I'm just going to use a sleeve from another chuck, but anything that is going to meet the outside diameter of the sleeve will work, like a piece of pipe. And we're just going to compress that with the vise, and you'll see that sleeve slide down to the left, and you should see just a sliver of that ring that sits right under the lock ring. There you go. And that's a seated sleeve. And then we'll just check for operation, make sure that the jaws spin all the way in and then spin all the way back out, and they're still aligned. Good to go. So here we have the Quill spindle assembly, and we're just going to put it in a vise. And we're going to be installing the Quill retaining ring. And if you remember how we took it off, we used some vice grips, and that's how we're going to put it back on. So the purpose of this retaining ring is actually to keep the quill from not going, or the spindle, from not going too deep inside the head, going up. It'll bottom out on this retaining ring. And that keeps you from bending and breaking off the machine screws that lock the spindle pulley assembly bearings in place. So we have a spacer washer that goes inside the feed stop bracket. This is the only drill press that I know of that does this, the Gen 2s. I'm not entirely sure that that spacer is 100% necessary, but it's in there. And And then we're going to go ahead and chuck in this Allen wrench inside the chuck. And we'll lock that in place. Now we need to clean the socket in the chuck and the taper that's on this spindle. I'm just using some acetone. So you don't want to put oil on this or anything like that. You want it to be completely clean and dry. And if the chuck seats on the taper like it's supposed to, you won't have to worry about moisture getting in there and causing rust or anything like that. All right, so we got that cleaned out. So now we can go ahead and insert the taper inside the socket of the chuck and tighten down the safety lock ring, safety lock collar. And I don't have anything holding that feed stop bracket in place, so it's going to keep sliding down. I'm just going to use a spanner wrench to tighten that safety lock collar in place. It needs to be on there pretty tight. About like that. Next, we're going to install the screw, lock washer, and nut into the feed stop bracket. We're not going to lock the feed stop bracket in place yet. We're just going to put those in there so we don't lose them. Otherwise, you'll spend 20 minutes looking around the shop for where did I put that screw, nut, and lock washer. Then we've got another washer that slides down over the quill and rests on top of that retaining ring. And then we've got the quill gasket that rests on top of that washer. Which there's a lot more hardware here than on any of the other Classic Craftsman drill presses. I'm not quite sure why. I'm sure there's a rhyme or reason to it, but yeah, it is what it is. So we can just go ahead and remove the chuck from that Allen key and head back over to the bench. Here we are with the belt cover, and we're installing the spindle cover. And it's got 3 little screws. Too easy. And then we've got the end cap for the cover. And that's got 4 screws that hold it in place. We'll tighten all 4 of those down. I like this belt cover. I like the design. That's the belt cover. So then we've got the feed handle rods and knobs, and we're just going to go ahead and insert the knobs on all these rods. There's 3 of them. And then we've got the model number panel that goes on the base. And we're going to install this with 2 number 4 1/4-inch long drive screws. We'll use that brass punch to set them. And then we're going to go ahead and lube the table. So we're going to be lubing the bores. You got there's 2 column bores, and then you've got the lock bore. And I'm using Super Lube, and I'll be using it extensively in the next video. But this is what I use for all of my tools that I work on. And then we'll get that second bore for the column. We just need to tilt that table to get at it. And that's the table. Next, we're going to work on the head. So we're installing the modified switch mounting plate. Now, I cleaned up all those wires with some more zip ties before we installed it. This has 4 screws. I'll just screw it down. I think I might have bent it a little bit. It's supposed to have kind of a bend in that center line down it to kind of meet the profile of the head, but yeah, no big deal. It's not too far, not too badly bent out of shape, so I think we may have got it a little bit more flat than it needed to be when we were installing that power cord in it. Next, we're going to go ahead and start lubing the head, and I'm not lubing the bores where the bearing sits. I'm lubing the bore that the quill slides in, and then all the other bores that are on there. You don't want to put any lube in those bores where you're going to have bearings. Once we got the head lubricated, we can install the guard plate. And this has 2 screws and 2 lock washers that hold it in place. Not sure why it has the lock washers. Didn't really need them, but they're there, so we're putting them in. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. If you got any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below. Don't forget about all the good links and stuff that I have in the comments section below. And the next video, we will finish the assembly of the drill press. So as always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.